Hi, everyone. Welcome to Kids in the Outdoors 2.0. So last year we did Kids in the Outdoors, but this year we wanted to expand upon some of the things that we talked about last year. So before we get started, we're going to introduce ourselves. We'll do a little recap of last year, so that way if you missed out, you can kind of get some information as to what we talked about, and then we'll actually get into some more specific things related to the environment, related to using the outdoors with children. And then at the end, we have some actual activities that you can do and some examples of some things to do with kids outside.
Hi everyone, my name is Julie Boyle and I am an extension educator in Dakota County and I also work with Beyond School Bells. So I work with after school programs across Northeast Nebraska and specifically with the Think, Make, Create labs. So those are mobile maker spaces and a lot of that stuff can be used to support outside education and nature education. I am also the state contact for Junior Master Gardener, which is a gardening and nature education program.
My name is Sarah Roberts, and I am with Nebraska Extension in Dixon County. So I am up in Northeast Nebraska in a county office. I cover Dixon, Dakota, Wayne, Thurston, and Pierce counties. I'm an early childhood educator, so I typically work with children birth to age 8 and any adults that also work with young children. So we will do adult trainings and workshops for preschool teachers, child care providers, basically anybody that has children, young children, or works with young children. I specialize in science and nature education, so that's why I got brought onto this project here. So I'm really excited to be able to share some of the things that I love to talk about and love to teach about with you all today. So again, like I said, welcome to Kids in the Outdoors 2.0, and we'll do a little bit of recap and then get started with some activities. So one of the things we talked about last year was kind of some of the things to consider in regards to outdoor education. So the first one is exploration, then we have appreciation, conservation, mindfulness, and health. And basically those all kind of relate to outdoor education, and they're important key items to think about when you're teaching kids outdoors or when you're using the outdoors in any way with children. So the first one is exploration. So when we think about exploring the outdoors, we always think about it being environmentally friendly. So the outdoors is available to pretty much anyone. Even if you live in an urban setting, there's still some nature spaces that you can find, even if they're small. Even a plant on your windowsill is considered nature. So we just want to make that connection with children and help them to see the importance of nature, whether that means going out into a huge field like rural children may have access to, or just providing them with a green space that they can kind of nurture and love. The other thing about outdoor education is it's affordable. So like I said, it's usually free. Even if you go to a specific like park, or if you're looking at, in Omaha specifically, there's the zoo, and that's a good kind of way to include nature in your program. But most of the areas just going outdoors are free. You don't have to pay for anything. So the affordability is there, and it's also timeless. So no matter how old you are, whether you are a baby or a 90-year-old grandma, you can still access the outdoors and you can still find something that interests you. So like I said, I work with early childhood. So that's one of the things that we try to do is to connect even little tiny babies to the outdoors. So that way they can start building that love and appreciation, which brings us to the next point of appreciating the outdoors. So the outdoors allows children to be creative and use their creativity in lots of different ways. It's very sensory. So when we think about young children, that kind of sensory thing is very important because that's how they're figuring out their environment. They're looking at things, they're listening, they're touching things. They might even be tasting things outdoors. And then that just leads to the overall appreciation of the beauty that nature offers. Even in the winters that we have here in Nebraska, there's still things that you can find beautiful. Even the snow, when it's falling down very softly, there's like a quiet that just comes over the environment. And it's just a really cool thing to do and to notice. Noticing the trees, noticing the wildlife that's out there. So just that appreciation of nature is really important. Then kind of even linking to that, once we can kind of build that appreciation with children and even adults, then we can bring in the conservation aspect. And that really is just involving taking children outdoors and giving them that time to explore and that time to find the things that they're interested in and to find their passions outdoors. And then the last point there is repetition. So just making sure to do that often. Here in Nebraska, we have some kind of hairy weather sometimes, so it may not be feasible to go outdoors every single day, but the more that you can do that, the more you can build on that appreciation and that need and that wants to conserve and preserve that for future generations. So the last two things are kind of connected to each other. So the mindfulness and the health aspect of the outdoors is something that research has shown. This not new research, so this is all kind of old things that we know about nature and taking children outdoors. So one of them is that the outdoors lowers stress levels, and you can see that as an adult too. I mean, even if you go outdoors, during your lunch break or something, take a 5 or 10 minute walk. There are studies that show that your stress levels are brought down just from being outside. There's increased endorphins, and so that helps to build our mood and make us happier people. And there's heightened concentration. And this is really key for children, because if we're expecting them to be in a classroom all day long, sitting at a desk or, whatever it may be that they're doing, we want them to be able to concentrate. So if we can provide even just a few minutes outdoors for them to kind of recharge and refresh, that builds and increases their concentration once they get back in the classroom. So then, leading into the health part of this, overall, nature helps us to have better vision. It helps lower our BMI, so it just makes us healthier. It encourages physical education, so it enhances those motor skills that children are learning to use from when they're really young all the way into adulthood. So all of these different things contribute to the importance of outdoor education and the reason that it's so important no matter what age you are. So one of the things as teachers or as, educators of children, we kind of have some things to think about when you are utilizing the outdoors with children. So a couple of things that you can do. So these are some of the roles that you will have as an educator with children. So the first one is a guide. So when you are guiding children outdoors, basically you're there to facilitate and scaffold children as they explore. So what does that mean? Well, facilitate means that you're kind of giving them tasks and then helping them out along the way. So that doesn't mean that you're doing things for them, but you have the chance to almost even, learn with them, which goes on to the next point. But when you're facilitating something, you're providing them with the materials that they need, as well as that guidance to be successful with whatever task that you're asking them to do. And then that scaffold piece is there because, we want children to be challenged, but we don't want it to be so hard that they give up and they just say, forget it, this is too hard, I don't want to do it. So there's kind of like this fine line between being too challenging and not challenging enough. Because if they're bored, that's when you start to see some behavior issues because they're trying to find something to entertain themselves. So we want to find that nice, gray area there from being just right for them to explore nature. And you can kind of, you'll have to do a little bit of observation about this and kind of watch them and see what they're saying, kind of see what they're interested in. So, you as the educator and as the guide are observing children in this, in this natural environment to see, okay, here's some of the things they're interested in. How can I build on that? And how can I keep their interest whenever we're doing something outside? The middle one, I think, is one of the most important pieces of this, because sometimes we forget to do this as adults. We want you to learn with your students. And I think that is one of the things that just creates a really authentic experience for kids, because if they see you learning with them, it just makes them more confident in themselves. Because, a lot of times they look at educators or as teachers as the kind of bearer of all knowledge. And, we're there to give them knowledge and to tell them what to do and this and that. But if you're learning with them, then they can understand that, you don't always have to have all the answers. You can learn something new. We're always learning new things. And so I think that also just encourages them to be a lifelong learner. And no matter how old they are, they can always learn something new. The last one is to be a designer. So this is just this goes a little bit hand in hand with the guide part, because you want to be intentional about the activities that you're setting up in the outdoors. And so, when you're there to facilitate, if you're intentional about the activity that you're doing, that just helps you to kind of take a step back and watch them kind of take the lead on things. So you want to kind of consider what you're wanting them to learn and what you actually want them to experience as you're developing these lessons. So it doesn't need to be something that's pretty random. A lot of times we do that. We just say, oh, that sounds fun. We'll just do this. But I want you to take it a little deeper. I want you to think about, how can I be intentional about what I am teaching or about what I am letting them experience? Because that is what is going to lead to that kind of deeper level learning, because it's not just an activity. It's actually something that we want them to think about and learn to problem solve and kind of get those skills and practice those skills that they're going to need throughout their whole life. So, it takes a little time on the front end, but it's totally worth it in the end, because you kind of start to see those light bulbs come off and you kind of see them actually thinking about things and practicing, collaboration and problem solving. And then they can even kind of be in charge of their own learning, which gives them that responsibility and gives them that ownership that draws them in. So the next piece of this is actually utilizing the environment. And this is some of the newer stuff that we wanted to kind of put into this presentation. So that way, now we're talking about the implementation. So we talked a little bit about why the outdoors is important and what you as an educator can do to facilitate that and to make it a good experience. But what does that look like? So when we think about using the environment, there's a couple of things to think about here too. So you want to think about your materials, you want to think about the space, and then you want to think about clothing. So in regards to materials, and you'll kind of see later on when we have our chance to actually go outside, materials, it depends, right? And so even when you're developing any lesson, whether it be indoors or outdoors, you're always going to have a list of materials. The awesome thing about the outdoors is you don't always need something, you don't always need expensive tools. You don't always need a whole bunch of things that you have to take outside. Sometimes the most fun and the most, valuable learning experience you will have is with no materials at all, just having them explore and use their five senses. So kind of think about that. And, I already talked about being intentional with your lesson development, but be intentional with the materials that you're choosing as well, because the more materials that you have out there, of course, that's going to be more cleanup for you, really. But what are you wanting them to learn, and what specific things are they going to be doing with those materials? So your materials list for your outdoor lessons may be a pencil and a piece of paper, or it may be nothing. It may be a magnifying glass. It may be a plastic bag. So just kind of think about what you're trying to get them to learn and experience, and then what materials will help facilitate that. The other thing to think about is your space. And so again, like I said, I live in a rural area, so I have a lot of space available to me. I have, my office is located at an arboretum, so we have a lovely tree area out here that I can, take kids out to. We can do activities and things. But if you're in an urban area, you may not have access to that, or it may be somewhere that's further away that you have to think about, the logistics of getting to that space. But, use the space that you have. So if you're at a school, I'm sure you have a playground or something like that. And even if it's a concrete space, you can think about growing some sort of plant to bring in that nature component. You can talk about why this space isn't a great space for nature, and kind of how we can facilitate a nature space in a concrete jungle, what we sometimes call it. But so think about the space that you have. If it means that you need to bring nature indoors because you don't have a great outdoor space, there's always a way to include nature in your teaching, regardless of whether you live in a high-rise apartment or if you live on a farm. So, even though there's those kind of two extremes, there's always a chance to bring in nature. Just be aware of your environment and use it to the best of your ability. The last part is clothing. And those of you from Nebraska know that, this happened last week. We were in the 60s wearing t-shirts and jeans, and then all of a sudden we're in the, sub-zero temperatures. So be aware of what clothing is necessary to go outdoors. You can still go outside in the rain. We may not want to, but that's still, that doesn't mean that we can't. Of course, if it's lightning or something like that, that's a little bit different. But consider what clothing that you want to encourage children and youth to have, whether that means that they bring a change of clothes if they're going to be outside for a little while and then come in and change clothes. But clothing is really important because it means it makes us feel comfortable in the environment. So if it's really cold, no one is going to be focused on the activity if they're freezing cold. So we want to make sure to have proper attire for that. Just the same as with heat. Nobody's going to be focused if they're, burning up and uncomfortable. So we have to make sure that we teach children what to wear outside when we're going out in nature, because you wouldn't believe the kids that are still wearing like flip-flops to try to go run around or something. And it's like, okay, we have to teach them these things so that way they know, all right, today I'm going out to explore. So what is the proper attire to be able to do that appropriately? So the next part, I'm just going to show you a couple of different pictures, and it's just some outdoor environments that I've had the chance to explore throughout my time with Extension. So the first one is actually an outdoor playground, I guess, if you want to call it that. So there's different aspects that they had here that children were allowed to explore. And since I'm early childhood, most of mine are going to be geared towards early childhood, but that doesn't mean that it's not available for all ages. So even as an adult, we had fun just exploring these different things. So the first one is a large tree trunk that they made into a playhouse. And I can almost probably guarantee you that older kids would find this entertaining. They may utilize the space differently than a 2-year-old, but they will still kind of find value somewhere and make that a space that is interesting to them. The next one on the right here is kind of just a little pavilion. So even if you have a small space that you're able to do something like that, there's a big stump in the middle, and that kind of represents the table. And then even some smaller stumps around the edge of that, and they're kind of carved into a chair. So that way kids can sit down there and do art projects. They can, read books, whatever it looks like, outdoors. But just kind of think about, what can I even add to some of the spaces that I have? And you may not have control over that, but it's certainly a way that you can brainstorm things and share with, administrators if you're working with people that might have the funds to do something like this. But, your job as an educator is to advocate for this kind of stuff and to say, this is why this is important, and this is why we want our kids to have access to this, because here's the research. And we talked a little bit about some of the important parts of outdoor education at the beginning, but there are so many different research articles out there and research projects that emphasize the importance of nature and outdoor education for all ages. So if that's something that you're interested in obtaining, you can certainly let anybody here at Nebraska Extension know, and we can help get you connected with the right people to find that research or to get access to that. And help you in that, in advocating for the students that you work with. So the next one, this is a way to incorporate music and sound into the outdoor environment. So this one, you can see there's just a palette, and they just stapled pie pans or screwed pie pans on there to make noise. There's a washboard on there, which is kind of cool. Those may be a little bit harder to find, but be creative. As the educator, you kind of can bring some of these things in and even have children and youth help you to build some of these things, because if they have some sweat equity into it, they're going to be more likely to take care of it. They're going to be more likely to value that and want to use it. So think about that too as you're developing some things to use with them outdoors. So then this next picture is just a couple of other environments. And again, I'm early childhood, so a lot of these are kind of geared towards younger kids, but you can certainly use them in different ways with older kids. So the one on the right is an outdoor kitchen. And in this case, it's kind of just a pretend sort of thing. But if you wanted to do something with older kids, you could actually have an outdoor kitchen and talk about cooking in the outdoors and what that looks like. Then on the left, this one is just another kind of little play space where they had some pallets and set up, plates. So it looks like a little tables out there. So depending on the age that you're working with, you can tailor this up or down, whether you're working with infants and toddlers or even high school or college age. And then this last one really is just some pictures of children outside. And fortunately, so this is my son. He is now 3, but this is him when he was a little bit younger. And I have tons of pictures of him outdoors because that is something that I value as a parent. And I want to make sure that he has access to and is available to him. So that way I can help him to develop that appreciation and develop that need for conservation. So the one on the left, this is actually in New Mexico, where we got to go spend some time at my grandparents' cabin, and there's a creek out there. And again, in all of these, there is very limited materials. So we talked a little bit about the materials part of it, but you don't have to have anything. So the one on the left, we're literally just in water, and he was picking up rocks and throwing them in the water and looking at different things. So just that exploration is just really important and really valuable for children. The middle one, he found a stick in the yard and was exploring that. So there's lots of different things that you can use with nature as your material. So you can use sticks, you can use rocks, you can use pine cones, all different things that are already outside. And then whenever you go back inside, you can either bring some of those things with you, or you can just leave them where they were at. So, the cleanup is super easy. So before we go into some of the actual outdoor activities, some things I want you to think about, and this was actually on last year's too, but I really like to emphasize this because a lot of us as adults, some people are uncomfortable going outside, some people don't like to go outside, and that's totally okay. But just remember that one of our jobs as adults is to kind of help children make decisions for themselves, figure out how to explore their environment appropriately. So even if you're not comfortable in the outdoors, that's a perfect opportunity for you to learn with children and kind of help them understand, it's okay to not like everything, but I want you to try it and to try experience different things. So some of the do's for outdoor education is become familiar with the research, and that we already talked about, because this is where it comes in, the important part of you being an advocate for education and for outdoor education. So be familiar with the research. That doesn't mean that you have to go out and read tons and tons of books on it or all these crazy research articles, but just be familiar with what's out there. So that way you have a little bit of background knowledge to say, well, actually this is why we take kids outside, because it is important. Move your classroom outdoors. And I tell teachers this all the time, is some of the things that you're doing inside can be done outdoors, and a lot of times even better and more effective than you were doing it inside. So think about how you can move your activities outdoors. A lot of times we have story time, or if we're doing an art project, we can move those things outside. The third component here is to teach others, and that goes along with the research part of it too, is if you're experiencing these things and you're learning how to do this stuff, how can you teach others and spread this, spread around these experiences with others who might not be doing this in their classroom, or doing this with their kids after school or through summer camp, whatever your setting looks like. How can you teach others to do this with their children? And then don't be afraid to get dirty and have fun. I mean, a lot of you are after school educators, so, that is what you do. So if you're outside, get dirty, have a good time. I mean, that just adds to the genuine and the authenticity of experiencing the outdoors with children. If they see you having fun, they're a lot more likely to have fun themselves. If you're out there with a bad attitude, then that's probably going to rub off on them. So kind of think about that. So as far as the don'ts, don't say things like, ooh, gross, and leave that alone and hurry up. So kind of think about your language that you're using with children. And like I said, I understand that some people don't like the outdoors. There's a lot of people that are uncomfortable. There's people that don't like bugs or snakes or any of wildlife things, and that's okay. But think about the opinions and the, viewpoints that you are kind of sharing with children that might be your own. So be careful with how you're saying things. If you don't like worms and a kid brings a worm up to you, think about how you can kind of facilitate that particular experience. So that way it's a positive experience, instead of being like, ooh, gross, go put that back where it goes. That's disgusting. Instead, even if you're not fond of that particular worm, you can say, you know what, let's put this worm back in its natural habitat, and then we can watch it and see what it actually does. So you're still saying, I don't want to be close to that, but how can I turn this into a learning moment for a child, instead of just saying disgusting, don't have that near me. So just kind of think about the language that you're using with children when you are outside. So one thing I do want to share with you is some resources that are available. This one is actually our STEM Imagination Guides, and it is specific, mostly geared towards early childhood, so kind of that pre-K We even have an infant toddler section on these guides, but you can certainly use them with older children. And you might have heard of the summer reading program, and this actually fits right into the summer reading program. So we developed these STEM imagination guides to go with the same theme as the summer reading program, but it is geared towards early childhood. So if you work with, any kind of younger children, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, that sort of thing, these are really great activities to be able to use with them. And they're already, made for you. There's already your materials list on there. There's a book recommendation. There's a nature activity. There's an infant toddler activity on each one of these if you work with really young kids. But I encourage you to check them out. So you can go to go.unl.edu/imagination, and you can find all of the guides there. They are free, or they're available at no cost, because basically you just have to fill out a survey saying how you want to use them, and then you can download all of them for your own use. The cool thing about it is, so this is the third year that we've done this, and this year's theme is all about the ocean. So all of this year's guides are geared towards ocean conservation, water pollution, anything like that has to do with the ocean. But we also have guides from the previous 2 years. So last year we did like animal habitats, and then the year before that was using fairy tales with STEM. So those are available on that same website. They're archived on there. So you basically at this point have access to like 24 different guides, because each year we do 8. And so like I said, this is the third year. So you just, again, fill out a little quick survey, and then you have the opportunity to download those guides onto your device. All right, so the next piece of this is just to kind of actually go outside and see what kind of things we can do outdoors. And the cool thing about this next piece is that we don't have any materials. So this is a really great way to see what things that you can do outside, and think about how you can use these different activities with the children that you work with. Outdoor education can be fun and easy, and you don't even really need that many materials. Luckily for us, we're out in rural Nebraska, so we have the opportunity to go out to some wide open spaces. But even if you're in the urban setting, there's still lots of different things that you can do. One easy thing that you can do, if you have a line of trees or even a small area with smaller trees, you can have the kids go outside and actually find their favorite tree and describe it to their partner. So one of the things you can do is have them break up into partners. One partner will go out and kind of find their favorite tree and think about all the things that they would use to describe that tree, and then go to their partner and say, okay, here's the descriptive words for my tree. Let's see if you can find it. So for example, if I found this tree here, I might say, all right, this tree has a small branch coming out right here. There's kind of a black spot with no bark on it. It's a pretty tall tree, and it's winter, so there's no leaves on it. I might also say, there's another hole right here. The bark is kind of a lighter color, but it has some wider spots here. There's some moss on it. Oh, and then there's an even bigger bare spot down here. So I can kind of think about all of the different things, or things that I can see about this tree to use to describe to my partner, so that way when they're coming out to try to find it, they can try to find all of those different things. Another thing you can do is, if you have an area that has stumps around it or anything like that, you can actually use the stump to decide how old a tree is. This one has been out here for quite a while, so it's pretty weathered, so we can't necessarily see all the rings, but if you see how big it actually is, so we know that that's a pretty old tree considering how big the trunk would be. You can measure the diameter of the stump to see how far across it was. You can, for this tree, kids probably couldn't put their arms around it, but some of these other smaller trees, you could have them put their arms around to see how many arm widths around that particular tree is. We found this one too, and this one's kind of cool because it's got some fungus down here. I'm not sure what kind of fungus this is, but a lot of times on these dead and rotting trees, you'll find the fungus because that's what they eat. They're decomposers, and they eat all of that rotting material that's coming up from the tree or the ground. The only thing to make note of is if you're finding any of this stuff, make sure that kids aren't going to eat it, because there are a lot of poisonous mushrooms and poisonous fungus out there. But you can certainly take pictures of it. You could, if you had gloves on, take some samples of it and put it in a bag, and later on try to figure out what kind it was. But pictures would still do the same job there instead of having to collect it. Another really easy thing to do is to take kids on a nature walk. So like we said before, we are out here in kind of a rural area, so there are a lot of trees out behind us, but even in the urban setting, you can definitely go on a quick nature walk down the street, outside in your own backyard, and find all kinds of different things out there. So one thing to remember when you're going on your nature walk is to make sure everybody's dressed appropriately. So we're out here, it's almost February and it's a little chilly, so we have jackets on. We could have gloves on if we wanted to, but so just make sure that everybody has the appropriate clothing on, so that way they're warm or cool, whichever season that you're doing this. The other thing is you can have children bring something to collect their items with. So you might have a paper sack, you might have an ice cream bucket, you might have just a regular pail, anything like that that they could collect nature items. Be careful what you're collecting. Usually if we're finding live flowers or something, we don't necessarily want to pick the flowers, but those might be a great opportunity to take pictures and then later try to identify those flowers back in the classroom. So those are just a couple of tips before you go on your nature walk. But once you're outside, there's all kinds of things that you can try to collect. So like I said, we're out here and it's almost February, so everything is looking kind of dead and brown, but that doesn't mean that there are still things we can't find. So we have rocks out here, we have little piles of grass, we have other plants that even in the winter kind of have some cool textures and colors on them, so things like this. There's also sticks that we can find. They may be on the tree or they may be on the ground, but one thing you can look for is buds that might be coming out, because even though the tree looks like it's dead, it's not. So all of these little things right here are buds, and so eventually when the weather warms up, those will start to blossom out and become leaves or flowers in the spring. So if you're in an area where there might be rocks or stumps that you could lift up, you can always do that to see what kinds of things are living underneath it. So I don't know if we'll find anything under here since it's cold out, but sometimes when you lift up, you can see how long a log has been sitting there. So this one might have been there for a little while, but you might find bugs or other insects or even something else. If you're out in the country, you might find a snake, which maybe you don't want to find that, but still pretty cool. This one, we saw this tree out here, and I'm not really sure what happened here, but you can see that it has this nice smooth part where the bark came off of it. So sometimes if you find this out in the wild, sometimes animals will rub onto it and get the bark off of it, especially deer that are in rut can do that too. Or if they're scratching on their antlers or things like that. I don't know that I have a lot of deer out here, so I'm not really sure what happened with this tree, but it's still kind of cool to see. This one they could also use as one of their descriptive trees with their partners, because this one would be a pretty easy one to identify, especially with this nice smooth white part right here. So we've come upon some feathers. So this is kind of a grouping of feathers. So here's one right here. Here's some over here. So you can also use your nature walk to decide if something has happened or to figure out what kind of animals live around there. So in this case, we see that some of these like puffs of feathers. So I don't know if there was a baby bird over here. Maybe it was a bird that was being attacked by something, but either way, sometimes the animal evidence left behind can tell us a story about that. So that's another cool thing that you can do, is say, all right, kids, we found this area of feathers. What do you think happened? And they can come up with a story to tell what they think happened in this particular spot. Another activity you can do is fort building with sticks. These sticks just happen to be this way. We didn't make this fort like this, but kids love to collect all these different size sticks, and you can prop them up on different things and make an actual fort. And believe it or not, they will talk about that for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's really, really fun. There's a lot of skills that are involved in that. Fine motor, gross motor, collaborative thinking skills, problem solving, all different things that are just used with sticks. And again, even if you don't live in an outdoor open space, you can do this even in your own backyard. So you can probably find someone that's collecting sticks in their yard, and they might be willing to donate those to be able to give to the kids so that way they can make their fort. An easy thing that you can do is find somebody that is either cutting down a tree or has a tree that they need to get removed, or you can even try a lumber company and see if they have any scraps. But one thing that we did is took one of our trees that we had cut down and cut the trunk into different sizes so that way we could have some stumps. So we put them outside for my son to climb on. He could step over them. So another really cheap and easy way to kind of create some balance beams, some things to do with gross motor skills, and just some interest into your outdoor play space. So these are what we call tree cookies. So again, this one was cut from a tree trunk, but it was just a thinner piece. So you could find a thicker, larger stick, I guess, and cut different sizes out of this. But tree cookies, you can do lots of different things with. You can use them for art projects. You can use them outside. You can use them kind of to toss around. So just be creative with some of the materials that you might have laying around. I don't know what it is about sticks that kids love, but even smaller sticks like this that you can find outside. So, we live in Nebraska, so there's a lot of wind around here. So we have the opportunity to find lots of sticks after they've blown out of the trees. But, you can use them for loose parts outside. You can also use them for art projects, nature projects, or you can do, when you go on your nature walk, use them to collect and find different aspects of the stick. So like this one has different colors on it. It's a different shape. You can even talk about the alphabet. So this one kind of looks like a letter L to me, but then if you turn it this way, maybe it looks a little bit like an R. So lots of different ways that you can use nature in your teaching to not only talk about letters and numbers, but shapes, colors, textures, all kinds of different things. So as you can see, we've been out here for probably, 20 or so minutes, and we have no materials. So all we've been doing is walking around, noticing all the different things that are outside, finding places that we could build stick forts. We found some bird feathers. We found some evidence of insects under different kinds of rocks and logs. So we don't even have materials, and it's been super easy. So this would be the perfect opportunity to bring kids outdoors. Luckily today is a nice day. Like I said, it is a little cool, but still kind of the sun's trying to come out. Lots of opportunities for kids to just explore. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you took something away that you can use with your kiddos tomorrow. And if you have any questions, we'd love to talk with you and connect with you. But I'll leave you one quote before we head out here. So there's no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate clothing. So that's one of my favorite quotes for nature and outdoor education, because we always can find a way to incorporate nature or get outside. So I encourage you to think about that and try to do that as much as you can. So again, like I said, if you need to contact us, this is our information. Julie is in the Dakota County office and I'm in the Dickson County office, but we can certainly help you wherever you're located, set you up with resources or get you in touch with people that can help you. So feel free to reach out, and we hope everyone has a great day. Thanks.